carrying on our Sabbath School from this morning. Lesson 11. Peter on the great controversy. We've tackled most of Sunday, which was 1 Peter chapter 2 verses 9 and 10. And we're suggesting that we can make a present day application in these verses because we tied the verses that we have read, 2 Peter chapter 2, and we read from verses 1, read down to verse 10 I think it was, but from verses 1 to 8 we saw that we could make an application there with what chapter? With what book? Isaiah chapter 28. We read from verses 7 to around 16. And the word that we picked up to do that was what? Yeah. It was 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 8.
Hearing the word.
And it was the word stumble. Read verse 8. And a stone of stumbling and a rock of offence, even to them which stumble at the word, being disobedient, whereunto also they were appointed. And verse 9 says, And ye are a chosen generation, of royal priesthood, and holy nation, a holy people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvellous light, which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. And we said that that was referring to what? Or who?
Gentiles.
To the Gentiles. The Gentiles. Mr. Bianca, what do you say? Right?
So we said that. How much is it in say that?
What that Peter's referring to, I'm saying.
Okay.
Peter's referring to the Gentiles here. He said, you weren't chosen, you weren't a people, but now you are.
So you was Gentile, now you've got a priest instead of their church.
And we're making an application that... What's the application?
That the Gentiles are actually the SDA church, and we are coming out of it to be disciples of 9/11.
Okay, so we want to say that we're not coming out of anything.
Okay, coming out of it.
So let's go to Hosea, the book Hosea. When you get there, shout out the page number, please.
852.
Not in that Bible, not in that Bible. In the other one.
848.
Hosea, I just said the book of Hosea, I didn't give the chapter yet.
The Old Testament, 848.
The reason why we're looking at this is because we were in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 10. We were in the book of Isaiah. Yeah? Then read from 1 Peter 2:10, which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God, which have not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. What we're going to see is that very subtly, very carefully, Peter is making an application of an Old Testament history, a passage, and he's going to make a present day application. Present day for his time. Okay? The New Testament writers do that frequently. Paul is the expert who does that because he writes most of the New Testament. We're all on the same page, we're all there. Are you with this project? You found it?
Isaiah chapter.
I didn't give the chapter, this is the book of Isaiah. Just as long as Isaiah is a very small chapter, a very small book. So, let's read verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1, to get the historical setting of this passage. The word of the Lord that came unto Hosea, the son of Beri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So those kings that are listed, and how many kings are listed? 4 kings. So it's not an accident there are 4 kings listed, because he wants to make a point.
Can you write the scriptures on there?
He wants to make the point. Sorry?
Can you write the scriptures on the board?
On what? You mean the verse?
Isaiah, yeah, well,
Chapter 1, verse 1. Chapter 1, verse 1. So there are 4 kings of Judah that are listed here. And what do we understand the number 4 to represent? It can represent a number of things.
Isn't it 5 things?
Because they mentioned Jeroboam as well.
4 kings of Judah. So you want to notice that there are 4 kings of Judah that have been labelled. And this number 4 can represent different things. But it can represent the progressive destruction. Correct? Or a final generation, you come to the last generation. Okay? So, sorry?
destruction or restoration.
You also identify restoration. And then it says, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. So you'll see that he does a very interesting thing here. He's listed 4 kings of Judah, but how many kings of Israel is he listed? So he listed 1. Now if you go and check the chronologies, you'll find that after Jeroboam, and by the way, this Jeroboam, there are 2 Jeroboams in the story of Israel. There's Jeroboam, which normally people call Jeroboam 1, Jeroboam 2. Are you familiar with that? So the first Jeroboam, he's around in the time period of Solomon, and the nation's going to be split after Solomon, and the 2 kings are going to be Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Rehoboam is in the south, Jeroboam is in the north, and Jeroboam's going to do what? What's his biggest crime that he's going to commit? Sorry?
Build up the temples.
Build up the temples. Idolatry.
Worship.
It's going to build golden calves. It's going to build 2 golden calves. You know the cities? Dan and Bethel. Dan and Bethel. So he's going to build these 2. And then a long time afterwards, a very long time afterwards, there's another Jeroboam that's going to come on the scene.
Jeroboam 2.
This is what we call, this is going to be called Jeroboam 2. And
Second Jeroboam.
this is the second Jeroboam, yeah. So this Jeroboam that's been spoken of in the book of Hosea, is this Jeroboam. But he's not the last king. And in fact, if you line up the kings, by the time you get to, we just read Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz and Hezekiah, there are a number of kings who come after Jeroboam. There's Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah and Hoshea. There's a number of kings who come afterwards. And if you were to line up the kings with Judah with the kings of Israel, you'll see that as he's going through these kings of Judah, so he's got Jotham, Ahaz, etc. There are a number of other kings that are brought to view in Israel. So he must be doing that for a reason. So let me try and draw that.
This is Jeroboam in verse 1, it's Jeroboam 2.
That's correct. So if we were to talk about the ministry of Hosea, Hosea's ministry begins here, and he's listing 4 kings. 1, 2, 3, 4 kings. And then he lists Jeroboam. And Jeroboam is around this kind of period here. So here's Jeroboam, and these are the 4 kings of Judah that have been listed. So let's just go back to Hosea. Now, this is Hezekiah. In the time period when Hezekiah is reigning, who's reigning in Israel? You know the name of the king? Last king.
Ahaz.
Last king. Correct? No, this is Hoshea. And Hoshea is the last king. So the ministry of Hosea is running from Uzziah to Hezekiah. It tells you that in the verse. And if you parallel that with the kings of Israel, it's also running from Jeroboam to Hoshea. It's running through those kings there.
So it was Rehoboam prior to that time.
Rehoboam. So on a time scale, if this was Saul, David, Solomon, then the kingdom splits to Rehoboam and Jeroboam. This is way down the end here. This is Jeroboam 2 and Hoshea. This is hundreds of years later. I just want to check one more piece of information.
That's how we get one of the dates from Christmas 20.
Oh, so Hosea, as we know, it's Hosea.
Sorry? No. Hoshea is the name of a king. Hosea is the name of a prophet.
Oh.
So the two, you won't see the name Hoshea in anything that we're looking at the moment. I'm just giving you some.
It says that in the introduction, that's all.
In the
introduction on the book of Hosea.
It says what?
Hosea.
Where does it say that?
The title at the bottom. The name Hosea, Hebrew Hosea, is a shortened form of Hebrew Hosea.
Oh, okay, yeah, but when I mean Hoshea, I'm talking about King Hoshea. So they're similar names. I don't. Yeah. Okay. So between this king and this king, there are 7 kings. There are 7 kings between these two. Between these two. So I'm going to put 7 thunders. And here's 4 kings that are listed. So I'm going to put the number 4. So straight away, you can see that the book of Hosea is dealing about some prophetic significance, because you've got 7 kings and you've got the number 4 brought to view here. If you've done any studies in the past about 7 thunders, you know that from 1989 to the Sunday law is 7 thunders. Some of us are familiar with that. Yeah? Or if you want to go into Millerite history, you would pick up from what day? So you go from 1798 to October the 22nd, 1844. This is a delineation of events that transpired between the first and second angel's messages, and they're the 7 thunders. So you find this information in Revelation chapter 10. So these 7 thunders can be typified by the 7 last kings of Judah. You may or may not be familiar with that study, but you can also see that there's a history that's connected to these 7 thunders, which is our history. I'm going to rub this out here.
Revelation chapter 10.
Revelation chapter 10. So if I put 1989 here, and I put 9/11, and I put Midnight Cry, are we all understanding what I'm doing here? Yeah? So we've got 7 thunders in our history here. And these 7 thunders are to do with the SDA Church. Yeah? Because this is the timeline of the reform line of Judah. Millerites, Christ, Seventh-day Adventist Church.
The priests of the Present Testament, so the priests that are called out from the Gentile world of the church, the first group of priests.
So let me stop you there. Let me stop your question. Let me stop you in your question, because you're asking a question and you've got a premise behind it. The premise you said was.
If you said Judah.
Let me stop you. The premise you said was the priests that come out of the Gentiles.
Okay. Well,
So that's a premise, and I don't think that's a correct premise.
But what I'm trying to understand, so when you say this is
Ask me a question. Ask me a question.
Okay, so what line is it? You're doing from the priest, Judah or Israel.
So
The seventh.
this is Judah.
Okay, Judah.
So this line of Judah, the 7 thunders of Judah, are we all okay with that?
Yes.
Does it have to be 7 events? Yes, it has to be 7 events. I'm not gonna put all the events down because that wasn't the point I was trying to make. I wasn't trying to make the point about what the 7 events are. Just want to make the point that when you look at the book Hosea, because of the introduction that it's given you, you know it has an end time application. I'm just trying to show you how you can show that from previous studies that you should be reasonably familiar with, or you may have heard. So there are 7 thunders that are being marked in this history here. These 7 thunders comes from the principle or the concept that there are 7 kings in Judah. And these are the 7 last kings. Who are the 7 last kings of Judah? Do we all know them by name? Starts off with Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah, Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. Jehoiakim, Zedekiah. So this is where we begin to understand that these kings can be represented by 7 thunders. So we have 7 thunders of Judah, but you can also see that there are 7 thunders of Israel. Remember we just showed that the nation is split between Judah and Israel. And if you want to see a clear position or a clear place where you can understand that we should be looking at the 7 last kings of Israel, where would you go to? Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. Because here, it only marks Jeroboam. But it says that Hosea's ministry begins with Uzziah and ends with Hezekiah. And if you line up these 4 kings with the kings that are ruling in Israel, you have 4 kings in Judah, but you're going to have 7 kings in Israel. So there's Jeroboam, and we listed the other 5 out, and he ends with Hoshea. Does that make sense? So in our line, we understand that the 7 thunders of Israel looks like that. It's going to begin here at the midnight cry, and we could put Jeroboam 2, and it's going to end with Hoshea. And this would be, who would this be, Sister Reverend? Which king would this be? Line of Judah. Yep, good. Zedekiah. Brother Jerome? Manasseh, good. So, you can see how these, even if you don't understand all the technicalities about how you do it, you can begin to see how we can construct these things. So here's 7 thunders. But what Hosea is also going to do for us, he's not only going to point out that there are 7 thunders, or these 7 kings of Israel, he's going to line it up with 4 kings in the kingdom of Judah. So you may or may not have seen studies about why this, and as I'm going through it, I can't even think that there has been a study on this, to be honest. I don't think people have spoken about this. That in the period of these last 7 kings, you've only got 4 kings in Judah. So this is a connection between 7 thunders and the number 4. The reason we're talking about this...
They did that in the number 4 chart, because they said that the last... There was 3 kings in between, but they...
I'm not sure what your question is.
You wasn't sure that this had been spoken of before.
I can't hear you now, sorry.
He said he wasn't sure that this had been spoken of before.
Okay.
But it mentions, but I remember Jeff saying that the 7 kings, but it's only marked 4, because there was 3 kings before another.
That's a different study.
That's a different one.
That's a different study. That's a different study. These are 4 little kings lining up with 7 little kings, and they all line up, beginning to end, and you've marked number 4 and 7 thunders, all in one go. Little history. That was your own.
Yeah, I'm just a bit confused about the number, not the number 4, but the 4th king with Hezekiah.
Oh, okay. Have I missed something then? What have I missed?
I'm not sure, but I don't.
I just read it from verse 1.
No, I'm with you on the timeline.
Okay.
But just this whole 7 kings within the four kings of Judah, I think I'm just a bit.
I'm not making any application on this. All I'm just saying to you is that when you've got 4 kings in Judah, it's lining up exactly with 7 kings in Israel. So you've got the number 7 and the number 4 occurring at the same time period. So that would teach you there's something significant that people have not looked at between Uzziah and Hezekiah. So,
So from his Jeroboam 2 to Hosea, you said there's 4 kings.
there's 7 kings all the way through.
Right, okay, yeah. So that's the notes I've got, that there's 7.
I'll read them out. There's 4 in Judah and there's 7 in Israel. And it's Jeroboam, Zechariah, Shalom, Menahem, Pekahiah, Pekah, and Hoshea. That's 7 kings. And those 7 kings are lining up with these 4.
Who are the 4 that are lined up in Judah? They're lined up the 4 in Judah.
Yep, and they're listed in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1. So what you can do is go into the stories of these 4 kings, and you should be able to see a history repeating in those 4 kings that we should all be reasonably familiar with.
And clearly distinguish the difference between Judah and Israel.
The distinction between Judah and Israel.
Why are you saying the 7 line up in the 4?
Because that's what they're doing literally in history. When this king Uzziah is reigning, Jeroboam is reigning, and when Hezekiah is reigning, Hoshea is reigning, they actually line up.
Okay, so they live.
They have a contemporaneous reign. So we just read 2 Peter 2:10, which in time past were a people, but are now not a people. So which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God, which have not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. And we apply that to the Gentiles. But what we want to see is that Peter is actually quoting from the book of Hosea. He's actually quoting from the book of Hosea when he talks about this. So let's see the verses that he's speaking of here. So let's read we'll read from verse 6. First of all, before we read verse 6, we'll read from verse 2.
Are we in Hosea or Peter now?
Hosea. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So, why is he marrying a whore?
Develop a message.
Develop a message to...
Give an example of what Israel's doing.
So this is the parable, so he's going to give an example. Now, I read verse 2, chapter 1, verse 2. Now, in the story of Hosea, you're not going to find the destruction of Jerusalem brought to view. It's not brought to view here. But who's the last king of Israel? Hoshea. And he's going to come to his demise in what year?
722.
722.
722 or something.
And what year are we talking? 722? Why say 722?
That's the last year. That's the year.
That's last year of his reign, 722? I can't hear you,
I
sorry.
apologize, I'm guessing. Well, I'm not guessing.
Oh, you're guessing.
I'm just reading my Bible.
Right from your Bible. Which Bible? Which page?
my chronology.
Oh, Brother Thomas!
723.
We have to publicly denounce you. After 8 years on this message, and you're giving us the table that's in the back of your Bible.
So he's 10 actually.
723. Okay, 723. He's going to come to his demise here, but he doesn't mention it in the book of Hosea. But Hosea's ministry is in this time frame. So, what do we know about the book of Hosea? It's written before 723, before the destruction, and 722 would be afterwards.
Oh yeah.
722 would be afterwards. He's confusing you. Okay, so I'm going to mark this as a close of probation, a type of a close of probation.
Number 4, 724.
723 is a close of probation for Israel. We okay with that? So just before this, the book of Hosea is being written. It's being written just before this time period. And he's going to marry a wife of whoredom. And he's representing the story between Israel and God. Israel is committing whoredom. So who does Hosea represent? Hosea or Christ? We could say Christ. He represents, because Christ marries his church. So he's representing Christ, and her name is Gomer. It says in verse 3, we didn't read it. Her name is Gomer. Who does Gomer represent?
The church.
The church, who's in whoredom. So she's already in whoredom before this, before the destruction happens. Then he's going to have some children with Gomer. And let's read verse 6. And she conceived again, and bare a daughter, and God said unto him, call her name Loruhama, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. So this is the prediction. So here you know, we haven't reached 723, but he's given her a name, Loruhama, and it means not having mercy. And he says, I'm going to name it because he's not going to have mercy on him. But if you tie that up with 1 Peter chapter 2:10, it says, which in time past were not a people, but now are the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. So here's this picking up 2:10. He's quoting from Hosea.
So
Verse 6
means obtain mercy.
That's right. Verse 7. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Verse 8. By the way, if you're doing a study in the 2520, you need to factor all of this into this story here, because this is dealing with Isaiah 7. This is dealing with Isaiah 7, this verse here that we just read. How he's going to save Judah. How he's going to save Judah? Not by military strength. And do you know the story about Ahaz? When he gets the promise from Isaiah and he says, trust in the word of the Lord that these people are not going to win, and then your kingdom will be established, you have to be established. What does he end up doing? Who does he go to? Who does Ahaz go to? Who does he receive help from? Sorry? He goes to the Assyrians. He goes to the Assyrians and he gets help, military help and strength from them. So you can see how they were meant to be saved. So because he doesn't obey, they're going to receive their 25:20. So most people don't. You need to factor in Hosea chapter 1 into that. Verse 8. Now when she had weaned Loruhama, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, call his name Loruhama, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. And so Loruhama means not my people, just straight. So who's he talking about that you're not my people?
Israel.
Talking about Israel. Sorry? Yeah, but specifically he's talking about Israel here. So you can see an application that's being made in 2 Peter that he's talking about God's people, because he's quoting directly from an Old Testament passage that just before a certain time period where they're going to be destroyed because they're in adultery with the world, he's going to punish Israel. And then we're just going to read from chapter 2, I think it is.
What was the link from Peter to Hosea to say that?
Someone tell Sister Couture what the link was, if they knew, if they can recognise what the link was.
Peter to Hosea.
How did we get from Peter to Hosea?
Reference in Hosea.
Yeah, she's saying how. Where you seeing the connection?
Which in time past were not people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy,
Hosea chapter 2:10.
but now obtained mercy.
So we're picking up two threads. We're picking up they don't have mercy and they're not his people. They're the two threads, and you can see that. We just read that in verses 6 and verse 9, was it? And we're going to read chapter 2, verse 23. Hosea chapter 2, verse 23. And I will sow her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy, and I will say to them which were not my people, Thou art my people, and they shall say, Thou art my God.
What did you read from?
2:23. Hosea 2:23. And who's he referring to? Who's he referring to? Israel. You want to say Ruth? You're going to get a problem if it's Ruth, because who is he talking about? If you're talking about Ruth, you're talking about the true Gentiles. You can't find the passage? Yeah, good. Okay, so all I wanted to say, the reason I wanted to bring this to Hosea was to show us that Peter is also talking about the church. He's also talking about the church.
I was talking about Ruth when she says, I will be your people and you'll
Yes,
again.
yes. So let me put something else on that I want to just quickly show us. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 13. First Peter chapter 5, verse 13. The church that is at Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth Marcus, my son. So what's that saying? How do we read that? We've got to speak loud. Sister Shamila, what you say?
The church that is at Babylon, so
Okay.
it's not in Babylon, it's not Babylon, but it's there
Okay.
in the area. And that church would be
What are they doing?
people.
What are they doing?
They've been elected together.
And what are they doing?
Probably worshipping, actually.
It says, saluteth you.
Greet.
So that means to greet. So the church of Babylon are greeting whoever he's writing to. And how? 5:13. 1 Peter 5:13. The church that is in Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth Marcus my son. How would Peter know that the church in Babylon are saluting them? How would Peter know that?
We receive a word. One is the Spirit.
Or he was,
In there.
or he was there. Or he was there. So the likelihood, because it doesn't talk about anything else, he would be in the same place. He says, I'm saluting you, and so does the church here. The church here, wherever I am, is saluting you as well. And he's saying he's in where? He's in Babylon. Now, you can't see it in the passage, but if you see the historical context of when all this is being written, you know he's not in Babylon when he's writing this. He's actually in the city of Rome. He's in Rome when he's writing 1st and 2nd Peter. It's right toward the end of his ministry. So when he says Babylon, he's actually referring to Rome. So that's just an aside, really. But I want to identify that he's identifying.
Is that Rome?
Well, that is Babylon.
Rome, the city. This is the city. He's in the city of Rome. Does everybody know where Peter died, by the way, like his end? He dies in Rome.
Wasn't it crucified near the same place as Christ?
So I'm just going to read from. Let me find a book that everybody can pick up with. Pick up from Acts of the Apostles. Acts of the Apostles 537. AA 537.1. AA 537.1. In the providence of God, Peter was permitted to close his ministry in Rome, where his imprisonment was ordered by the Emperor Nero about the time of Paul's final arrest. Thus the two veteran apostles, who for many years had been widely separated in their labours, were to bear their last witness for Christ in the world's metropolis, and upon its soil to shed their blood as the seed of a vast harvest of saints and martyrs. So both of them are in the city of Rome at the very end of their ministry, and that's where he's writing these two books. Now, if you're an expert in New Testament history, and I'm not, you can, by piecing a lot of information together, you can get an idea of when all of this is happening. You get an idea of when all of this is happening. And if I were to put this timeline, and I put AD 66 and AD 70, what would that mean to us?
That's around Jerusalem.
Sorry, you're number 4, you're going to make number 4? Why do you make number 4? Because it's 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay, Brother Jones, you think?
There must be some other.
That's Titus and yeah, Cestius.
Do you know which order is it? Sorry?
Cestus first.
Okay, this is at the Emperor's from that period.
Cestus and Titus. Okay. So what's he talking about though? What's the story?
Siege of Jerusalem.
This is the siege of Jerusalem. So let's tackle this for you because it's not 4, is it? How much is it?
3.5.
Yeah. This is 3.5 times, and the dividing of time. So this is 3.5 times, 3.5 years, or 1260. There's a lot of symbology in all of this story. What's the difference between this and this? What's the difference between them?
So one actually does destruction, one just treats
What happens here?
destruction.
Before that?
Yeah, they've got a siege.
There's a siege. And what's this? Sorry?
I said in that book of names, it does have the meaning does have a positive aspect to his name, and there was a positive aspect. Well, because he didn't originally intend for the temple to be burnt down, it's just the God was infuriated. He wanted to rescue the temple and keep it.
Okay, let's try and keep on subject. So, they're the same event. They're the same event.
One with mercy, one without.
You said, what's the difference?
Yeah, there isn't any difference. They're the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say. They're the same thing. Yeah? And we can line this up with 9/11, and we can line this up with Sunday law. Yeah? What's the difference between 9/11 and the Sunday law?
One was a warning.
Nothing. Because they're the same. They're the same. Obviously one is a warning, but they're the same event. They're the same event. On a number of different levels.
But you can only see that spiritually, though. You can't see it technically, though. Because 9/11 was behind the scenes to see it as a statement, and it was an open event.
So this takes us back to line upon line, If you don't follow the methodology, it's all in darkness. And what's going to happen? You're going to stumble, then fall back and be taken. And so you want to make this covenant with death to make sure that doesn't happen. So, coming back to Peter. 1st, 2nd Peter are written in this time period here. This is 1st and 2nd Peter. Are written in this time period here, between this point and this point. And who's he talking to?
The church in Rome.
He's addressing them, yes. And who's he referring to? In our chapter 1 when we were talking about. He's not talking about the Gentiles, it says verse 9, 2 verse 9. Ye are royal priesthood. So who's he talking about? Ye. So ye are. He's talking to the
Christian.
priests. He's talking to the priests.
The physical priests or the
Sorry?
the new priests like Christ.
Oh, okay, so this is what we're tackling. When you begin to see where you line his history up, his literal history, and how you see his prophetic application, then you can begin to see who he's talking to. Because if we're saying that 1st, 2nd Peter were written between this time period here, and we know that 66 and 70 line up with 9/11 and the Sunday law, I think we've explained why it is. I don't want to go into the proof of that, why 9/11 is 66, and why Sunday law is AD 70. But you might have even if you're not fully sure, you can see maybe some logical reasoning behind that. So maybe we could add Psalm 48 here. I'm not going to read Psalm 48.
This is guesswork now. This is happening.
Sorry?
Why do you say maybe? This is
Maybe what?
You said maybe we could add some.
I say maybe we could add Psalm 48 because I'm not going to prove that we can add Psalm 48.
But we can add it there for the
It's established in my mind,
Okay, but we can.
but not in Brother Jerome's mind, so I can't say it is. I have to say maybe.
Okay, so we can show ourselves to be wide read and see that it is. Okay.
Yeah, so we can stand it up. So I'm just going to put that there, Psalm 48. That's going to help us do that. So what we're doing is, let me just summarise where we are to. He's addressing the priests. It says, but you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, peculiar people. Talking about you. Now he's talking about in his day and age, all the Christian church, the New Testament church, everybody. So how do we go about making an application of that? So first what we did was, we said in verse 10, he said, you weren't a people and you didn't have mercy. So we went back to Hosea. And then we looked at the historical setting of Hosea. The historical setting of Hosea is talking about the 4 kings of Judah and the 7 kings of Israel before their destruction, before the close of probation. Now you can draw another timeline onto this history here, because normally 723 here would be here. Close of probation. General close of probation. Yeah, general close of probation, because that's the end of the 10 tribes. And this is the line of the 10 tribes. This is...
So that's the USA Sunday law, and then that's the global Sunday law, Hosea.
So this is the church, and this is the world. This is the line of the world, this is the line of the church. Israel represents the line of the world. Judah represents the line of the SDA church. But you can do a lot more than that. So what you might think is that this is just referring to this close of probation here. 1-on-1. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. What I'm trying to say is this, that if you were just to take this, Jeroboam 2 to Hosea, it's talking about the history of the world. Okay? But that's good and fine. So I'm saying let's put that to one side. But Israel are God's people. And you can bring another line of truth. You can bring another line of truth that's dealing with this story here. And you can apply it also to God's people.
Okay.
So there's a close of probation here, isn't there? Yeah? There's a close of probation here for the SDA church, for Judah. Zedekiah. And you can apply this code of probation also into this history by drawing another truth, which we're not going to do. We're not drawing this other line of truth, but I'll just give you the clue for that. Because what you could do, you could go to the book of Isaiah, and in the book of Isaiah, if you went to chapter 6, and you went then to 723, you could see that there's a story here that's being spoken of. And this would also line up with our story, because Isaiah chapter 6 is a story of 9/11. The story of chapter 6 is the story of 9/11. I wasn't going to go to Isaiah 6, but I'm just trying to show you the reasoning without proving it, of the legitimacy that you can make this date here the general code of probation, and you can also make it the Sunday law. Because at one level, Israel is God's people. At one level it's God's people, and at one level it's a representation of the world. It has two symbols. Symbol can mean two things.
So when you say general corporation, like you've got the USA law, and then you've got the world global.
Yeah, you know that. That's why I'm not clarifying that, because you already know. So you can do that from Isaiah chapter 6. This was Isaiah 6. Sister Shamila.
So the Israel is represented by the.
Not represented by, it represents.
It represents. Which one?
It can represent two things. It can represent the world. The seven thunders from Jeroboam to Hoshea, the seven thunders that represent the world. But it could also be a line that represents God's people. So,
is there a second witness to that?
To what?
That Israel is represented. Israel represents Jeroboam to Hoshea. And
I don't understand what you're asking. That we say second witness, that's historically correct. It's not a second witness, it's a fact. Israel are Jeroboam to Hoshea. That's just factual history. That's not. We're not making an application to get second witness. That's fact.
That it's linked to the world, Israel.
So if you're asking, that's a different question. If you're asking, can you give a witness that Israel? You can go to Ezekiel chapter 37. Ezekiel chapter 37.
The Spirit of God says Israel is the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Please don't put your hand up and just talk, because I wanted to go to someone else. Okay? It is a question, not a statement.
Yes, it's a question. You say that Hoshea is the close of probation, which is Daniel 12:1, but Hoshea was the second coming of Christ.
Do you prefer to put it as second coming of Christ?
Yeah, I've heard before it's the second coming, because Hoshea itself means deliverer. So when Jeff was explaining it before, it said pointing it down to the final deliverance of God's people, which means the second advent, as opposed to the close of probation in Daniel 12:1, which is a little bit before that. So unless we want to think of it differently in terms of the second coming of Christ still, but applied to the coming of Christ spiritually in us when we, are perfect.
So I don't have a problem if you want to make that the general close of probation, or you want to make it Christ's second coming. I think there's arguments for both. But I'm happy to keep it at close of probation, because it marks the close of probation in that history there. 723 is the close of probation for a nation, and if you can apply that same logic here, it would be the close of probation. But if you want to make it the second advent, I've got no problem with that.
Christ's coming is the fruit of the close of probation.
And there's anyway. I don't want to get into the technicalities of that, because it wasn't.
So the only point we're trying to make is that we can use 723 for the world, but also the church as well.
Yes. So that's the logic that we use to go from 1st and 2nd Peter, particularly 1st Peter, back to Hosea. And then we look at the historical setting of the books themselves when they were written, the books, 1st and 2nd Peter. They're written in this time period here, between these two events. And if that's correct, then you know when he talks about you are a priesthood, he must be talking about the priests that are being referred to between 9/11 and the Sunday law. And if you can make that step, that connection, then you can begin to understand how you make a prophetic application. Because when it says you are not a people, when were we not a people? This is what Sister Emma said in Sabbath School. Sorry?
Before
1844 isn't even in our vision of this thing. Before 9/11. So before 9/11 you weren't a people. But you were all Adventists before 9/11.
So that is actually emphasising the priests all the way through 9/11 to the Sunday law, and not the Levite. Because I've come a few months behind with the material, so I just want to clarify.
You've got to put your hand up and wait for me to say something. Otherwise it serves no purpose. So we weren't a people here. But were we SDAs here?
Yeah.
We were SDAs, but we weren't a people. But now we're a people. Was that?
So when did we stop being a people? Because we became a denomination. From 18.
Okay, so this is what we need to be careful is. When I spoke in Sabbath School and Scripture, I said we've got to be careful the words that we use and what we mean by those words. This is not talking about Seventh-day Adventism being denominated and not denominated. This is not talking about Seventh-day Adventists being Babylon and not being Babylon. This is talking about a very unique and specific history that's being brought to view that you can only ever see if you understand how these lines work. If you don't understand how the lines work, you can't make this application. So the application is this, that we're all Adventists, all good and well. But from 9/11 onwards, now there's this discussion that's being brought to view about priests. So now there's priests that are being brought to view here. I'm going to rub some of this out because it's not doing much for us. We take Cestus, Titus out. And so this is the time period of the priest. Don't do that, Brother Richard. Do that. No, you don't apologise because you keep doing it. Stop! It's all being filmed. It's going to go around the world. You're going to tell me everything. You're telling me when your brothers are in public. So this is the priesthood that's being discussed. The royal generation. You said royal generation?
Yes.
Chosen generation, the royal priesthood, a holy nation. Now we're making application here, which is very different and unique, that has, compared to how most people would understand this. So if we weren't a people here, but we're a people here, okay, then it doesn't say this here, but from this point onwards, we're now going into covenant. We're now going into covenant with God in a way that we weren't in covenant before. Because before we were in whoredom with him, according to Hosea. But Hosea is, remember, he's talking about Israel, but we can make that application because they are part of God's church at one level. Because Revelation 7 and the book of James talks about the 12 tribes. Yeah, it talks about the 12 tribes, so at one level you can have a personal application that they represent God's people. Sister Shamila.
Could you also say Babylon when you say they were in whoredom, God's people?
No, because I wasn't in Babylon before 9/11, and I don't think most people here were, if you're in the church. The church is not Babylon. We were in Adventism, but...
Could you say you were in?
Yeah, Mr. White says that the church is not Babylon, but Babylon is in the church.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to show me that verse because I don't know what that statement is. If you show me that statement, then we could read it together. I'm reticent to make a paraphrase of the Spirit Prophecy quote. That is that controversial.
Also, the scripture you were reading
Oh, wait, when you say also, I'm contending the fact that
It's connected to it.
I'm contending the fact that you're making a statement about Babylon.
Yeah, that's what it's going to say. It's going to say that here. 2 Peter chapter 5 verse 13. I'm sorry, First Peter chapter 5.
That's what we just read a moment ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The church that is at Babylon.
Right.
So could that be related to what you're saying here, how before 9/11 the church was not, God's people were not part of, they were not part of this message. It hadn't come into light.
Yeah, but I don't know the connection to Babylon that you're trying to make, which is what I'm nervous about. You're trying to make an application to Babylon, which I'm not sure.
The wardens, I mean. Because...
Abomination and sins.
Okay, yeah.
Brother Thomas.
I think there's 2 points. You could just probably say that there were people without shepherds at 9/11, they had shepherds.
Yeah.
So
we go with that.
I was going to ask
You're going to ask me privately. You don't want it filmed.
you didn't feel threatened when I said 1844 you could put there?
Where?
Where it says 9/11. Because before that they were not people. And if you do 9 to 9, it would be the same principle. So before 1844 they were not people. But as of 1844 they were people.
Same as applied to Jesus and his disciples and the church.
I'm just bringing up the fact that there was a time when there was not people and there wasn't. There was 2 dates of.
Okay.
I mentioned it, you didn't like it.
But I didn't like it, because I'm trying to make a present day application, and I'd have to work through what you're trying to say, what point that would be. Because I don't know if we could make an application that they were a royal priesthood. Or maybe I'm mistaken in that.
In response to what Thomas has said, with regards to the one online, I don't think it would be 1844 in terms of the 22nd of October. I think it would be the 19th of April, because the 19th of April is when Babylon is fallen, and 9/11 is where the leadership is passed by. So we have similarities there. And from other, when we line up the histories generally, April 19th, 1844 is 9/11, so I think it would definitely be April 19th, 1844, as opposed to October 22nd.
That's why I was reticent to...
In reference to what Thomas just said.
To make application. Chapter 4. 1 Peter, chapter 4. From Monday.
I just read an interesting quote. I was looking for the one that Shamila was referring to. It doesn't really say that exactly, but I think I'll read it anyway. It's from the book PAM. Pamphlet, sorry.
PAM. PAM is not pamphlet. PAM is
Pastoral
pamphlet.
Ministry.
Pastoral Ministry, I think.
Yeah, it says church policies, church organisation. The church must be organised to carry out and enforce order, or it will scatter into fragments. I was shown that some have been fearing they should become Babylon if they organise, but the churches in central New York have been perfect Babylon, confusion. And now, unless the churches are so organised that they can carry out and enforce order, they have nothing to hope for in the future.
What was referenced? PAC?
PAM for 41.1.
And
How did that reference to what's really the same?
I thought this made perfect reference also to us.
okay,
Find it later.
you find it later. I'll bring it to us. 1 Peter 4, 1-7. For as much then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revellings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it's strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you, who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead. For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but to live according to God in the Spirit. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober, and watch unto prayer. So it says a lot of things there. Let's just go back to verse 3. For the time past of our life may suffice us to wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revellings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. So what's that telling you, based upon our line, that God is trying to teach us?
We were doing that stuff before we were people.
Sorry?
That we were doing that before we were people.
We were doing that. We were living like that before we became a people. Sister Joe?
Yeah.
So from 9/11, when we enter into covenant, when we become a holy nation, chosen generation, a royal priesthood, we're supposed to be living differently. We're supposed to be living differently.
From 9/11.
From 9/11. Verse 4 says, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you. Why did they speak evil of these people? According to verse 4.
Changed, they're not going to run to excess.
Oh, okay, so they're speaking evil of you because you've got better or worse?
Yeah, right.
Worse in their eyes.
Yeah, but you agree because you've got better or worse? Because you've got better, now they're going to speak ill of you. Okay, because they say, all these holy people, you know, we don't like them anymore because they're holier than thou. Yeah? Have you ever heard anybody accuse us of that?
Yes.
That we're such good people, so nice, so holy, so pure, that they want to start saying bad things about us.
They don't call it that. They call it extreme.
Extreme.
Fanatical. They don't call it holy, they call it fanatical and extreme.
They say you think you're holy.
You think you're holy.
You think you're better than us.
Who's they?
Who's they?
It's nominal.
Oh, people.
The ones that are not here.
The priest and the priest. Isaiah 28. The scornful leaders. The scornful men which lead these people. Brother Robert, you had your hand up.
Yes, with regards to speaking evil in verse 4, I connected it with Matthew 24, verse 48 and 49, that talks about the servants that delay the Lord's coming in their hearts. That evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord, delay his coming, but they shall begin to smite their fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunken, which of course is kind of the same theme as in verse 4. And with regards to the word smite, John Luther brought out in his book that it links with Jeremiah 18:18 that says, come, let us smite him with the tongue, that we may not give heed to any of his words. And so I thought that this thought connected very nicely here, saying that they not only speak evil of us, but they smite us with our words. They don't want to listen to the message that we have.
And that's what my experience is. When you're all right with God, they just ignore you and pretend you're not there. But then when you sin, which I don't advise to do, but I have that in my experience, then they want to know you, and then they don't mind being your friend. But then when you get back by the mercy of God's grace and the depth of His mercy, they don't want to know you again.
So they think it's strange that you don't run with them in the same excess of right, speaking evil of you. And Sister Natasha said that they don't use that quite language, but they recognise that we're holier than them. Is that what you said? Kind of.
They they recognise that you're living and doing as the word says, but it makes them think that you think you're holy. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Is that your experience, man?
No, they don't. They think we are holier than thou. They don't believe we're holier than thou. They don't believe we're more holy than them.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The same thing, I think.
Let me ask another question then. Are you holier than them?
Should be.
Recently,
I would like to say.
Maggie says we should be.
Peter
Let's be holy forever.
Let's take Maggie out of this story. The Apostle Peter says that you're supposed to be. So we're supposed to be. There is this back-to-back comparison between these priests and everyone else. Sister Anna?
Yeah, we should be.
We should be. Oh, sorry, Captain.
At the times.
No, let's not use that phraseology like that, please.
Okay, I know some other people that say that we should think like that.
Like that.
What would so do you disagree with that notion that we shouldn't think like that? We shouldn't think that we are holier than everybody else.
I'm not asking what we should think or not, I'm just asking what the fact reality should be, and Brother David clearly said, the Apostle Peter says, you're required to be.
Jesus said the same with the disciples. Be like the Pharisees, but be everything that Jesus tells them to be. In other words, we're supposed to be strict like the Pharisees, but also have the love of Jesus in them. In other words, we do need to be holy.
Do what they say, but not what they do.
Brother David.
we say we're supposed to, but as it is written, that ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye show forth the praise of him that hath brought you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Ye are.
Present tense. Reality. And verse 7. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober, and watch unto prayer. So everything, the end of all things, AD 70, is at hand. What does it mean, as is at hand?
Yeah, the door's here.
It's not here, doesn't mean it's here.
We're going to meet him.
It's just coming in. It's just coming. So when did we know it was just coming? 9/11. So you know, this is from 9/11 to the son-in-law, because that's what you know, it's just at hand. Otherwise you don't know. Ask most people in the church, they don't know that it's just at hand. And
Jesus said, watch unto prayer also as in the garden, wouldn't he? To the disciples.
verse 8 and 9. And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. What does fervent mean? Fred, you've got to speak loud. Diligent.
Devoted.
Devoted. Ceaseless.
With energy.
With
That.
energy. Sorry? Someone said something, Sister Shabella.
Boiling hot.
It means to stretch out. It means to stretch out. So what kind of charity that should you have? Charity that stretches out to someone. Stretch?
Stretch out to me and answer my question.
Stretch?
Stretch out to me so I can answer the question. I can make a statement.
Same, I don't know what you mean, but carry on.
Sorry, when you was reading verse 6, and it says, verse 6? Sorry, verse
We skipped verse 6, but
Verse 8.
we didn't read verse. We read verses 3, 5 and 7.
Oh, sorry, just going back to verse 4, please, when it says, where they think it strange that you find no wisdom, to the same excess in his action, should we be righteous? Are you going to go all the way down?
Down to
12.
verse 12. Yeah. So I'm just getting there. We're in verse 8. And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves. That's above all things. So that means you need to reach out to one another, amongst yourselves, amongst ourselves, and have charity. And what does it mean for charity shall cover the multitude of sins? What does that mean?
And you're kind to people who don't see your sins. No, I'm just saying.
Sorry. Wait a second. I'm kind to you, so you won't see my sins. Is that what you meant? That's not what you meant.
No, I'm just saying, some people would say that.
Okay. What does it mean? For charity shall cover the multitude of sins.
I think love will be the benefit of quelling sins. In other words, through love, people will forsake sin.
Yeah.
Love conquers evil.
It's like husband and wife when it says that the husband's heart should be the graveyard for the wife's fault, or vice versa. That you won't hold those sins or faults against them. You won't, and we talked about this before, you won't see them, but the Lord will cover them and you'll defend their reputation like you own.
And I like to focus on this, that you can't see them. This just takes us back to our prayer meeting months ago. When you look to the light, which is the only place you're ever going to find this charity, everything else gets obscured. And the light does what? When you're looking at light, it blinds you to the multitudes of sins that surround you. You can see sin in everybody. But when you're looking at the light, they become a shadow. You can't see it. It covers that. It covers their sins. And the only way to see sin is how? How's the only way to see sin? When light shines upon the sin. And the only way that's going to happen, because I'm looking at Brother Thomas right now, and if I want to see his sin, how am I going to see it? Is if light is shining upon him, which must mean it must come from the back of me. The light must be behind me for it to shine upon him, because I'm looking at him. That's just science. Which means I've got my back to what?
Christ.
I've got my back to Christ. I've got my back to the light.
Why would Christ be shining light on your sins?
That's the only place how would I see your sin otherwise? The only reason I can see your sin is if light's shining upon you. If I can see you, just think about science. I can only see your behaviour by light shining upon you.
Yeah, I can see.
And light can only come from behind me for that to happen, because light's travelling. So if I turned around,
Light's what? Because light's travelling.
in straight lines. You can only travel in straight lines. So if now I was facing the light and Thomas was in front of me, he'd be a dark shadow. All of his sins would be hidden because I couldn't see them. It'd all be dark. All I could see would be a glorious halo around him at the best. That's all I could see about him. He looked pretty nice. Be a dark blob with all glory surrounding him. And I think that's what this is at least alluding to when charity shall cover the multitude of sins. Sister Shamila.
1 John chapter 1 verse 5. This then is the message which we have heard of him and declare unto you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ his Son cleanseth us from all sin. I've seen a picture of somebody with a match lit, and that light has no shadow in it, but you can see the shadow behind it. That means Christ, you don't see a shadow in Christ, because he's all light. And when you look at behind that flame on the match, if you ever light a match, you won't see the shadow in it, you'll see it behind it. So I just thought that was really grand. I thought you
Who had the hand up?
I was just going to say that this verse, 1 Peter 4:8, it has got the same phraseology in it as Proverbs 10, verse 12, which says that hatred stirreth up strifes, but love covereth all sins. And
hatred covereth.
No, sorry.
Hatred produces strife.
Yeah, stirs up strife, but love covers all sins.
Sister Natasha, why is there strife in this group? according to that verse.
The sin in speech.
Can you read the verse again,
He
please?
didn't read it, he paraphrased it. Read the verse.
I'll read it directly. It's Proverbs 10, verse 12. Hatred stirreth up strife.
Stop there.
Because there's hatred within the group.
There must be hatred in this group, is there strife?
Is it the only thing that stirs up strife?
No, but we're just picking one Bible verse out. There might be other Bible verses that we could say something else produces strife as well. But we know hatred does. There must be hatred in our hearts somewhere in this group if you're sensing that there's strife. So I'm only picking on Sister Natasha because he's just publicly said there's strife in our group. Not in the secret, everybody knows he said that. There's strife. And so there must be hatred in our group. The second part of the verse?
But love covereth all sins.
That's what we've just read here.
And yeah, so I'm mentioning it because it has the same.
Yeah, so we understood the point, and so that's a good verse. Sister Natasha.
I was going to say, I think few might say there isn't hatred, because we look on the word hatred in a different way. Like in the Bible, if you talk about your brother, you hate them. So it says.
It says.
So just backbiting shows hate.
And hatred is what? You actually want to murder the person, but you're just restrained from doing it. That's why it says.
How we look at hatred.
Yeah.
Biblically.
We want to minimise, or we want to make hatred so much over there, we don't actually realise that's what we've got in our heart. Brother Magic, verse 9. How do you deal with this?
Use hospitality one to another without grudging. How do I deal with it, or how should we deal with it?
You, not we.
I should be hospitable without grudging. Hospitality should come as second nature.
It says use hospitality. What are you supposed to be using hospitality for?
Sorry, what are you reading?
Oh, 1 Peter 4:9.
Oh, 4.
That's where we're reading. Above all things, have fervent charity among
Because we have
yourselves.
charity and love, so we are hospitable.
So we're supposed to use hospitality to do what?
To cover.
Fervent. What's fervent?
Means going beyond.
It means to reach out.
Use hospitality to reach out those who are not saved.
So it doesn't say not saved, it says among yourselves.
Among yourselves.
Because we're all priests. So we're supposed to use hospitality to reach out, and that's how we're supposed to express this love one to another, by being hospitable. But we're supposed to do it without grudging. Because most of us are pretty hospitable, but very few of us do it without grudging. We begrudge the hospitality that we give to one another. Sister Shamila.
If you look at the dictionary definition in the LGY app, or if you have it on your computer, you type the word fervent, it tells you what it means: to boil, hot, a fervent summer, fervent blood, hot in temper, vehement.
Yep, you told us that before, it means to boil.
Okay.
We were okay with that, yeah? We accepted that definition. And Brother Rob Thomas wants to take us to verse 12.
Oh, yeah, I was going to take you there because in verse 4 it says, the same excess wives are speaking of you. So then when you ask the question, should we be righteous? Verse 12 is basically saying, those who...
We're in 1 Peter 4:12.
Yeah. So beloved, think not strange concerning the fiery clouds, which is to try you as though some strange thing happened to you. So these fiery clouds are those who are condemning you in verse 4. And verse 13 says, because of these fiery clouds that we're going through in verse 4, but rejoice in as much as you are partakers of Christ. So you're going through these fiery clouds and you're partakers of Christ. So that means you are righteous. According to the
God has made people go through first.
Amen. Anything else you want to get from that? Because I like verse 15.
But let none of you suffer as a murderer or as a thief or because then he would do the busybody in his matters.
Yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this behalf. But the time is, we could read on. So, it's good to suffer for a good cause.
Yeah.
But most of us don't. Most of us, priests, suffer because we're evildoers. I wasn't picking on the busybodies, I don't know why you like that, but you seem to like that busybody bit.
I know lots of most of busybodies.
Oh, okay. So, we've run out of time. It's 2 o'clock. We only got to, I think, halfway through we didn't get to.
So are you saying a murderer is someone who makes
Brother David, what are you saying a murderer is? Or someone who hates?
Somebody who hates, yeah. Somebody who, murderer is somebody who hates someone.
Or someone who hates is someone who hates a murderer?
Someone who hates a murderer.
Is someone who hates, is that person a murderer?
Oh yeah.
Is that what you're after, Brother Thomas?
Yeah. So what's the thief then?
It says those who reveal other people's sins are the children of Belial.
What is a thief?
Someone that steals.
I had something else to say, but in reference to what a thief is, Ellen White talks about courtship between young men and young women, and she said, "Thou shalt not steal" is written on tables of stone, but how much deception and underhanded stealing is going on when affections are stolen but are not theirs to take.
Anyone has their hands up? I saw some hands up.
So I would just say thief is someone who steals someone's character. So the definition of that is if I go and whisper bad things about you, I've stolen your character, which should be a good character. I've stolen it and sold it.
My reputation.
Silver and a pair of shoes.
Reputation. Because you can't steal someone's character, but you can steal the reputation or crash that. Sister Bianca?
Yeah, I was saying that's what we were saying about murdering. Hate, why it's murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why?
That same reason. Because you're killing the person's character.
It starts in the mind, isn't it?
Starts in the mind.
Satan is turned from murderer from the beginning.
The murderer from the beginning. We've run out of time. If we want to carry, we only got to Monday, halfway through Monday. If we want to carry on the study, maybe we can organise something later in the day. Someone's home or something. Let's close it, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your goodness and mercy towards us, your loving kindness. Father, as we see the high calling of the priesthood, of the final generation in these last days, help us to examine ourselves. Father, we should be standing trembling before you when we realise how far we are away from you and your Son, the high calling of a priest. Father, each of us have done so much wrong in our lives, even since we came on to this message, even since we were called to be priests. And yet the word of God stands sure and firm and true, that we're supposed to have fervent love one for another. But Lord, so often, in so many ways, we hand out things to our brothers and sisters that appear to be love, but we hand them out begrudgingly, and therefore those gifts can no longer ever be considered to be loving gifts. Father, forgive us for all the hurt, the hatred and the harm that we have for one another. Lord, we're all bowed before you this afternoon, and yet even in the midst of us, we may have envy and strife. We may have hatred for a brother or a sister. Please, Father, speak to our hearts. Help each of us to be honest and open and true to you and to one another, that we might confess our faults one to another and be saved. Lord, above all things, the thing that should characterize your people, the disciples of 9/11, this royal priesthood, would be that we would have this love that reaches out to those around us, and that we would have and do things for one another without any grudging. Please be with us. Father, please forgive us. We ask and pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Let's close with